Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Al Parviter. I'm the Communications and Membership Officer at Jobs Australia. I'm just sort of introducing the webinar before Peter Defteros comes on to present, just to give you a bit of information about the instructions and on how to use the various functions of GoToWebinar. You'll see on the next slide a screenshot which is similar to the one that you guys should have showing on your screen, which has various instructions, including the open and close panel button at the top, which is highlighted in orange. Beneath that, you'll find your virtual hand, and we encourage you to use that throughout this. If you do have any questions at all, Peter will stop and we'll unmute you, and you can actually ask us the question, and we can sort of have a short discussion about it verbally. If you prefer not to do that, you can always type any questions you have into the questions box towards the bottom of your box there. You'll notice that below the virtual hand there's a microphone with a red line going through it. That's because we have you all muted. The reason for that at the moment is to stop any background noise that might be in your office and so forth. If we have you all unmuted, it can actually just create quite a lot of static. Lastly, the audio mode. If you've dialed in and you haven't entered an audio pin, which you should have been given when you logged in, it means that we won't have you actually registered as attending. You'll be in listen-only mode. So if you are sitting in front of your computer and you have got an audio pin, be sure to type that in. There should be a selection to have a new audio pin sent to you if you missed it. Now, if you have any technical difficulties, my mobile number's at the bottom. I'll just read it out. It's 0408 417 712, and you can give me a call, and I'll help you through any technical difficulties that you might have. So now I'll hand it over to Peter.
Hi everyone, and thanks Al for that introduction. I just wanted to say that basically I'm in the policy team here at Jobs Australia, and that if at any time during the presentation, please feel free to ask questions, raise your hand, and make any comments, because we definitely invite your participation if you would like to do so. So as you can see there on the slide, what we're going to be looking at today is looking at the job placement services that are being purchased by WorkCoverSA through a panel arrangement, and who's eligible to apply for them. We'll be looking at why WorkCoverSA is creating the panel, looking at their return to work strategy, the job placement services that are part of that strategy and the elements of those services and the different types of payments that are available. We'll quickly cover the application process, looking at some other opportunities that are there and how you can find out more information. So the purpose of this presentation, I just want to sort of, make it clear, and the main reason for that is that WorkCoverSA are running this purchasing process. They are the experts on work cover, on workers' compensation, and they know exactly what it is that they're wanting to purchase. So they're the experts on this, and I would encourage you, if you have further sort of questions about the process, to go to them, and I'll give you their contact details later on in the presentation. But I guess the purpose is just to give you a bit of a heads up on the services that are available, and just to help you get a better idea of the opportunity that's there, and perhaps make a more informed decision about whether or not you'd like to apply for them. And as I said, the definitive source of advice is WorkCoverSA. So just to get started, what we'd like to do is run a poll just to find out if any of you actually attended the WorkCoverSA information session in Adelaide, which was on last Thursday. So if you wouldn't mind responding to the poll, which I understand, Al, is visible now, and you should be able to see it there on your screen.
Yep, just select the yes or no option for us. We'll leave it open for another 15, 20 seconds.
Great. So I can see that most of you didn't attend there. So that helps us get a better sense of how much information you've probably got at this point. You can see the results there. All right. So about 9 out of 10, 90% of you didn't attend. So what is the whole point of this job placement services specialists purchasing process? Well, WorkCoverSA has created a new category of rehabilitation advisors that are called job placement specialists, and the aim is to assist injured workers achieve sustainable, suitable employment within their certified medical capacity with a new employer. So it's all about helping injured workers move to a new employer, not return to their old one. And the idea is to draw upon the job placement expertise and capabilities of JSA and DES providers. So WorkCoverSA are looking at appointing a small panel of less than 8 providers. This is advice that they said at the information session last week. They're yet to determine what the final size and composition of the panel will be, and that'll depend on the applications that they receive. But when they're determining the panel, they'll look at the capacity of providers, their expertise, their outcomes that they've achieved in the past, and of course they'll also be looking at achieving state coverage. So it looks like it's a pretty small panel really to cover the whole state. So it suggests it's going to be a pretty competitive process, depending on how many people apply though, I guess. So what organisations are eligible to apply? Well, those organisations that are already rehabilitation advisors under the WorkCover rehabilitation workers' compensation sort of scheme are eligible to apply. Or if you're currently contracted to provide JSA or DES in South Australia, you can also apply. So you must actually be delivering JSA or DES in South Australia to be eligible. And it's also worth noting that the program is scheduled to run from the 1st of July for 2 years until the 30th of June 2016. So if, for example, through a future purchasing process of JSA and or DES, you cease to be a provider of those services, that would kind of render you ineligible to be a job placement services specialist under this scheme. So, you'd need to, there could be some problems there. So that's something to keep in mind. But hopefully that wouldn't happen to any of you anyway. So we've got another poll now. What I'm interested to know is whether your organisation already provides services to injured workers through a state compensation scheme, and that might be in South Australia or perhaps in another state. So if you could just answer yes or no there, please. All right, so we're just in the process of sharing the results now from the poll, and we can see there that about 83% of you aren't already providing services to injured workers, so it's a new type of service for you by the looks of things for most of you. For those of you who do have experience, feel free to to share the benefit of your experience if you'd care to do that. So why WorkCoverSA creating a panel of job placement specialists? Well, there's about 3,000 workers getting assistance each year under the Workers' Compensation and Rehabilitation Scheme, and there's about 1,100 that are new referrals each year to new employer services. So they're the people who are being referred to basically change jobs, who need a new job with a new employer. What they've found is that there are very low return to work rates under their existing or previous arrangements. They're only getting 82% compared to, say, about 87 or 88% in most other jurisdictions, and they're getting declining outcome rates with new employer services. So the costs of finding workers new jobs and the average costs per claim have been rising. So there's real concerns that the system is too costly, and it makes a lot of financial sense, I think, for WorkCoverSA. If people go back to work and they're no longer on income maintenance, which is payment that they get after they get injured and they're not able to work. So the idea is that they want to create this new panel of job placement experts in order to get better employment outcomes for the injured workers. So the WorkCoverSA have implemented a new return to work services strategy, which was implemented in October. It's about trying to get more effective return to work services for both workers and businesses. There's a stronger focus on improving the return to work outcomes for injured workers, and they're wanting to get better value for money from the scheme, which is the South Australian Workers' Rehabilitation and Compensation Scheme. So there are a range of different services there. As you can see, there's pre-injury employer services, which are working to help somebody return to their original employer where they had their injury. There's fit for work services, which is sort of rehabilitation services. Job placement services, which is the focus of this presentation and of our interest now, and the competitive appointment process which is now underway. There's also return to work assessment services and some other services there as well. So what type of people are eligible to receive the services? It's injured workers who are seeking a new employer. They have to have at least 15 hours certified medical capacity, and they get referred into the scheme by WorkCoverSA or the claims agent. So this is a slide which describes the role of claims agents and case managers. So WorkCoverSA has outsourced the rehabilitation and compensation services to 2 external claims agents, and they employ the case managers. The role of case managers who work at the claims agent to determine if a worker is eligible for compensation, and they're also responsible for the day-to-day management and decisions about a worker's claim. They assess their return to work needs, and they identify the appropriate service which will best assist them to the worker to return to work. So this is a picture of the business process, and it's taken from the fees schedule, which I hope you have seen or are familiar with. Basically what you can see there is that the case manager is making the decisions early on, and they make an assessment about whether someone needs to go into job placement services or not, and whether they need intensive services, which is the stream on the sort of left-hand side, or whether the person just needs independent job-seeking support. And the fee schedule has a sort of detailed description of the types of services that are under both of those sort of streams. Both of the both of the streams require the case manager to develop a rehabilitation and return to work plan. And the key difference really between the intensive stream and the sort of independent stream is that the job placement specialist undertakes an initial assessment and completes an employment pathway plan. And it's interesting to note that the language is very much similar to the language used in JSA and DES. So part of one of the sort of categories of services are employment pathway services, and they're similar to EPF, but they're not a flexible pool of funds. They're actually sort of assigned to an individual injured worker client. So the details of the different types of services are in the fee schedule, and they're very much sort of standard things that you could purchase, such as through the EPF or in DES, maybe using service fees. And they're things like training. You can pay for reverse marketing. You can arrange for work trials. There's interview support, post-placement support. There's also payments for to consult with treatments of specialists and return to work service providers, and a whole range of other services, and they can a lot of them can be charged on an hourly basis. We've got somebody who's put up their hand. We've got Casey. Casey, do you have a question that you'd like to ask? Bring it in. So we're just waiting to hear. Oh no, it's okay. She's got technical problems. So with employment pathway services, they need to be sort of stated in an employment pathway plan for the clients who are in intensive services, or for those who have moved on from intensive to independent services. So they need to be in your employment pathway plan. Otherwise, there is an approval for the services to be purchased. If a job seeker has gone straight into the independent support stream, they don't have a plan. So the plan then is completed by the provider, and it needs to be then approved by WorkCoverSA or the claims agent. And once the approval is obtained, you can then purchase the employment pathway services. So WorkCoverSA will pay the reasonable costs of job placement services up to maximum amounts, and as I said earlier, the reimbursed employment pathway services must be detailed in the employment pathway plan. They'll also pay for services that are focused on the safe, early and durable return to work outcomes that are appropriate and necessary and that are approved by WorkCoverSA or the claims agent. So I guess it's a difference probably with JSA and DES is that the provider can't just make determinations about what things get spent on. It needs to be approved pretty much by the claims agent most of the time. There's also service fees. There's employment placement fees, and there's also durability fees, which are for partial and full outcomes. And whether or not they're partial or full, depends on the income that is received by the injured worker in their employment in relation to what they were earning before they had their injury. We've just got a technical glitch here. Okay, we're right to go now. So the other points that are important to note are that There's no guarantee of business if you are successful in being appointed to the panel of job placement specialists. It's also important to know, to understand the meaning and force of suitable employment compared to JSA job requirements. So suitable employment, basically it has to have regard to the worker's incapacity, their previous employment, their age, their education, skills, work experience, and their medical information, whether they're participating in any rehabilitation programs, and that sort of thing. So, unlike as far as I know in JSA, if a person wants to, or perhaps in DES for that matter, if somebody wants to work above their work capacity, as long as there's sort of agreement about that, then that's okay. Whereas under this legislation sort of environment, it's really strict, and people have to be working within their work capacity, which has been assessed by a medical specialist. This is a slide that is taken from the presentation that was delivered last Thursday, and you can see some of the key differences between JSA and DES and the South Australian workers' compensation sort of context. You can see there the benchmark for getting outcomes. Well, it says here that it's set by the job capacity assessment for JSA and DES. Well, that sort of whereas in WorkCoverSA it's set by their pre-injury earnings. In terms of employment options, it must be suitable employment only under the WorkCoverSA scheme, whereas it's less restricted under JSA or DES. The influence of the doctor's medical certificate is very complete control over the sort of work that you can do in the WorkCoverSA system, where it's not not as strong in the Commonwealth sort of context. With the employment pathway fund, it can be transferred to other job seekers in JSA, or funding spent in DES across different job seekers, whereas in this context for the WorkCoverSA scheme, it's only for the referred worker. There isn't a sort of global flexible pool. In terms of compliance management, well, there is no show, no pay in the Commonwealth context, whereas in WorkCoverSA there are different reporting arrangements where you would report to the claims agent if somebody is not participating. And in terms of reporting management, the contract manager plays a key role in JSA and DES, whereas in the WorkCoverSA scheme, it's the individual case manager. So how to apply? Well, you should have a look at the application for appointment document, and particularly the Part 3 application response. That response details the things that you have to do, and also has the selection criteria, like criteria 3.5, which is where you need to detail for each of the regions that you nominate your proposed approach to job placement and provide evidence of the effectiveness. And there's a whole range of sub-criteria there, like how do you define someone's suitable employment goals, taking into account their medical restrictions? How do you effectively engage job seekers who may not want to participate? How do you, what's your capability for sourcing jobs in a region? How will you assist people get selected by employers? And how will you support them to achieve sustainable job placements? There's also one of the parts of that criteria is your approach to managing a worker's fluctuating medical capacity to work, and how you would liaise with a treating medical practitioner. Criteria 3.6 is for each of the regions you need to provide an overview of your experience, relevant experience, and the outcomes you've achieved. For 3.7, you need to provide details of how your staff understand the suitable employment in the workers' compensation sort of scheme context, and how they understand legislation, and how you're going to develop and maintain your staff's knowledge of workers' compensation that are relevant to the services that are provided. You also need to describe how you manage, assess and manage risks. There's also going to be a requirement for people who apply to possibly do a presentation and demonstration of your past experience and what you would be proposing to deliver in the regions that you apply for. There's also going to be, you have to agree to your staff undertaking training in workers' compensation. You need to provide references, additional references, and you need to agree to site visits, which are all pretty kind of standard things in any funding application process. You need to have hard and electronic copies enclosed in an envelope, and they need to be delivered by post or hand by the 21st of March, which is about 3 weeks away. So looking at the timeline there, we can see the applications are open. The deadline for them, the deadline for queries is the 7th of March to put questions up to WorkCoverSA. The applications close on the 21st of March. The interviews and presentations for shortlisted applicants is in mid-April. Applicants will be advised in early May, and the appointment commences on the 1st of July. One of the questions that came up when this program first sort of appeared was, where does DES DMS fit in terms of all this? Particularly given that under DMS, if a job seeker who is entitled to compensation or damages who participates in DMS, they may be liable to repay the Commonwealth for the cost of their services. And basically the response is, it's pretty much business as usual. If an injured worker wants to participate in DES DMS, that section 23(2) of the Act would apply. But I suppose by developing this sort of targeted service, perhaps there's an expectation that maybe there wouldn't be too many people who would be going down that path, and that they'd be getting services through the state-funded system. But it'd be interesting to see whether that changes. It's also important to know that there's like a wage subsidy program available to employers in South Australia who take on, who are new employers who take on injured workers who can't return to their previous employer. And this is called the Re-Employment Incentive Scheme for Employers, or RISE. And it looks like it's quite a generous subsidy of up to 40% of gross wages for up to a year. There's also the possibility of getting support from a workplace rehabilitation provider, and also payments to cover workplace modifications and equipment if you can't get access to that through other means. Also, WorkCoverSA have advised me that they're planning information sessions for Fit for Work and Return to Work assessment services soon, and they're going to be releasing fee schedules for those services in March. So there are a couple of other opportunities that your organisation may want to look out for down the track. So if you would like to find out more, there's a website address at WorkCoverSA. They've also told me this week that they're going to publish FAQs which will be answers to questions that they've been receiving about this purchasing process. They're also going to be posting the presentation slides from the information session that they ran last week. I checked this morning whether they're there, and they still haven't published them yet. if you want to make any questions, you need to make them in writing, and they need to be made by the 7th of March, and they should be directed to the contact person, which is Leanne Ho, and you can see her email address there. So that just about wraps up my presentation. So I would welcome any comments or questions that you may have. But I'll just flick back to this slide, just because really I think if you're wanting to really learn more about the process, you really need to go to WorkCoverSA to find out more. So I'll just give it a moment or two just to see if anybody has a question or a comment they'd like to make. All right, look, thanks everyone. There hasn't been any questions or comments, so look, thank you all for attending today. I hope you found it useful. I wish you luck with your application, and yeah, so all the best with it, and we'll catch up with you next time. Thank you.